We feel very honored to be invited to speak, and we are going to speak not about the Easter itself, but about the period which arguably is even more important than Easter, at least in the opinion of certain theologians, and it's the Lent period. Let's start with a quote by St. John of the Ladder, and I'm going to explain later on why St. John of the Ladder, who lived in the 6th century, is important and influential for our subject. So that's what he says in chapter 14 of the Ladder. Do not deceive yourself. You cannot liberate yourself from the Pharaoh of thoughts or see the celestial Easter unless you partake of a bitter drug and unleavened bread at all times. The bitter drug is the effort and acceptance of fasting, and the unleavened bread is humble wisdom. Let you breathe with the following words of the psalm. When demons accosted me, I dressed in rags and humbled my soul with the fast, and the prayer returned into my soul. So St. John is writing for monks. He's writing in the tradition of asceticism. So how could this be relevant to the mercantile culture of medieval and early modern Rus? So in this presentation, we are going to look at a number of literary sources. First, Anatasija Nikitin's travelogue, then the Domostroi, a miscellaneous treatise from the 16th century, which is based on earlier sources, and then an episode from the 16th century, which features Ivan the Terrible and eating raw meat. So let's start with Anatasija Nikitin's journey over the three seas. So Anatasija Nikitin was a merchant who made a journey through India to sell some goods, including a stallion, and he completed the journey successfully, relatively successfully. At least he was able to return. And that's what he writes at the end of the treatise, after all the description of the foreign land he has visited. He writes penitently, I do not know the great Christian day, but I fasted with the Muslims during their fast, and I broke my fast with them. He concludes that he has lost his soul through fasting in the wrong way, through not keeping Easter, through not keeping Christian holidays. So here is a page from one of them codices with the words underlined. Looking at the Domostroi, it's a 16th century text, which was quite popular among the merchants. It's the analog of the Good Men of Paris in certain ways. In certain ways, it's not. So it's actually its prominence is somewhat underrated because its analogs, which are more concerned with religious life, were come up early on in medieval Rus, and they were widely popular. So the measure of virtue, the golden chain, Smaragdus, these are the manuscripts which discuss how to attain salvation for lay people as well. And these texts went into the Domostroi, which is a compilation, the 16th century compilation. But the Domostroi does more than compile, put together all kinds of soul-saving advice. What it does, it also provides lots of practical advice on how to keep your household, and that's why it was identified as a mercantile text, because the advice it provides, it would be relevant for merchants. It doesn't mention military service, which would be important and unavoidable for the nobility. but it clearly refers to very affluent households. And for our purposes today, one of the chapters, this is chapter 65, in one of the redactions, it provides very, very detailed rules on what to eat during different seasons of the year. And of course, Lent is there. Well, if you think that Lent is this dreary period where you can do nothing, eat nothing, and so on, and just how can you endure this, you should definitely read Domostroi. And it reads like an advertisement for gluttony, basically. I've put this full quote on the handout, but here is a part of it. It starts, during Lent, people put these dishes on the table. The little loaves used during a fast, pressed caviar gleaned from sturgeon during the autumn, fresh caviar from sturgeon and sterlet, liver of pigs passed with salmon and salmon. Oh, should be saffron, sorry. And so on and so forth. And only at the end you have so vegan dishes like onion tarts, fritters, pies stuffed with poppy seeds, sweet jellies, and unleavened bread. This is quite interesting and would be surprising for any practicing Russian Orthodox today, because currently in the Russian Orthodox Church, fish is only allowed on 2 days during Lent, and one of them is Palm Sunday. And the other is the Annunciation. Well, in the Middle Ages and early modern period, caviar was not a luxury meal. In some regions of the Russian Empire in the 17th century, caviar was food for dogs. So surprise, surprise. But apart from caviar, which could be equated like with lower status food and thus suitable for Lent period of abstinence, there are lots of references to fish, and this is quite striking. There is actually another redaction of Domostroi, which has fewer fish dishes, like 1 or 2 of them, also lots of caviar, more vegan dishes, but still there is fish. There has been suggestion that either these fish dishes are meant for those 2 days during Lent when you could eat fish, or it could have been the influence of like this dreary and destructive influence of Catholic Christianity and the merchants who obviously did business with other regions. And Domostroi has links to Novgorod, and Novgorod merchants were active in the Hanseatic Union. So basically, they could have been influenced by the Catholic tradition, where fish was accepted during Lent. The other suggestion, which is a blending of the two, is that fish could have been consumed only during weekends, and that's what the other redaction says. On Saturdays and Sundays, you eat these caviar and fish dishes. But even without caviar and fish dishes, the variety and richness of foods is very impressive. So, and now Edgar is going to talk about the 16th century.
Yes. The other tale which has some connection to the season of Lent and is widely known even today is the tale of Saint Nicholas of Pskov and his confrontation with Ivan the Terrible. Well, Lent being in spring, despite being a designated period for pious meditations and prayer, was also a beginning of a military campaign season, with roads drying and armies being able to move. And thus, Ivan the Terrible, pious as he was, but also very warlike, on 19th March 1570, entered the recently subdued rebellious city of Pskov. There was no fighting. The inhabitants of the city opened the gates, but they had their reasons to fear the worst, because previously Ivan had subdued their neighbors in Novgorod with fire and blood, and they opened the gates and welcomed Ivan traditionally with bread and salt, and implored him not to spill Christian blood. And then Saint Nicholas, Fool for Christ, or Yurodivy, the mad saint, a popular kind of sanctity in that period, confronted Ivan and brought him the piece of raw meat, saying, "Little Ivan, Ivashka," which is obviously meant as an insult to a monarch, "eat this." To which Ivan responded, "I'm a Christian. I do not eat meat during the Lent." "Yes, but you are willing to drink Christian blood," answered St. Nicholas. And either terrified or repentant, Ivan spared the city. There are several versions of this tale, ranging from Vita of St. Nicholas to memoirs of Ivan's foreign French and German officers. Even they may mention the confrontation, but they do not mention the meat. They're saying that the same day Ivan's warhorse died, and that terrified the Tsar. However, to the authors of the Vita of St. Nicholas, it would seem the idea of observing Lent was the marker of piety, and that made this confrontation very illustrative.
Yes, so I'll finish. And as Edgar said, Ivan spared Novgorod, Pskov, yes. But he actually continued campaigning during Lent, and reading the history of Livonia, we see that he entered Livonia, attacked Livonia numerous times during Lent. Obviously, it was a very convenient season. So, to bring it to conclusion, of course, Lent was singularly important in Orthodox rules, both for merchants and for the nobility. And its religious implications were particularly important in the Damastra. The spiritual value of Lent is mentioned in the first chapters, but the practical side is not to be neglected. And last night we actually tried one of the dishes from Damastra, a reconstructed recipe, and we can confirm that it's both filling and tasty. So the idea of Lent being a dreary season and a hard one needs to be somewhat mitigated. It definitely has its pleasures. Thank you for your attention.